Are you planning a natural birth, but you're at the end of your pregnancy? Okay, first, you need to take a deep breath here because I'm about to tell you something that's gonna freak you out just a tiny little bit. This is something that needed to be done at the beginning of your pregnancy. Because the longer you wait to start planning a natural birth and get everything prepared, the more you've had time to soak up the messages from society and from your doctor and from your family and friends and from the mom groups and possibly even getting the wrong education that's going to trap you into not getting the true physiological birth that you are capable of having. So if you are wanting a natural birth, the first thing I always tell my clients is if you're planning that, you need to be planning from the beginning of your pregnancy. Ideally, before you even pee on that stick, but anywhere between 25 weeks and 4 weeks is also a good time. But what happens if you're 3 weeks away from your due date and you're now starting to plan this and you're like, oh my God, like what the hell? I thought I had lots of time. And it's not your fault because the What to Expect When You're Expecting books and most of the mainstream childbirth books all say that this is the time when you start to talk to your doctor about your birth plans, is at the end of your pregnancy. And it's the biggest mistake that I see a lot of people making. Because what happens is that now you're getting the McDonald's menu option for the whole natural birth. It's a huge, huge problem. But what do? Okay, so first thing you need to do is you've got to get your fears tackled now. You have to figure those out so that they're not going to derail your birth. The next thing you're going to need to do is a crash course education on physiological birth. The best book that's going to help you with that is my all-time favorite, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, because that book will give you more of an idea of physiologial birth. But, sometimes we don't have a lot of time to read an extensive physiological birth book. I mean, this is huge and thick, right? So instead of that, you can always go and check out Midwife Thinking. It's one of my favorite places to follow. The author, Rachel Reed, of this book, she's the one that does all of the videos and the Instagram posts and everything. She has a podcast. You can also follow my YouTube channel. I talk a lot about the stuff that is in all of these childbirth books behind me. So you'll be able to get a crash course in physiological birth that way. There's a few videos that I particularly recommend. There's one where I did an interview with Michelle Short. So you need to get that right education. You need to figure out what physiological birth actually looks like, and you need to do that now. You also need to know what it looks like to have an intervention and when it's needed. So you need to have a crash course on why interventions get pushed, the most BS reasons for it, and how to navigate that. You also need to have a birth plan. If you don't already have a birth plan, oh my God, you need to create one right now. You need to figure out exactly what you want. And finally, you also need to have the idea of who you're hiring. So if your care provider isn't actually natural birth supportive, you need to know that now so that you can pivot, either leave them or find a way to communicate that you're in charge. All right? And finally, one last thing. If your environment isn't supportive of a physiological birth, if you're planning a birth in the hospital and they happen to give every single mom an IV and they restrict movement and they restrict food and drink and they have this idea that you need to give birth by a certain date, that is not the environment you want for a physiological natural birth.